please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Please be seated. I appreciate your kindness so very, very much. I appreciate Brother Wells a lot, and every time he rehearses some of that, I am reminded that, the Lord loves Catholic folks and other people that are out in the world, and whatever they're doing, wherever they are, He loves them. And if we'll do what we ought to do, we'll be able to win some of them. When we moved to Maryland, of course, I grew up in the South, in Kentucky, and had lived most of my life in the South. And when we moved to Maryland, I was so eager to get out on the street and just see if the gospel would work in a heavily Catholic territory. And it did. It did. And one of the agreements that I had, when I met with the pulpit committee, I told them, I said, there's a few things that I need to tell you about me and things I want to do and will do from the outset if you want me to be the pastor. And I told them, I think number 4 on my list was soul winning is what we will do. We'll be doing that. And the guys agreed to it. I don't think some of them had done much of it. But they agreed to it, and of course I didn't know whether they were going to live up to it or not, but they did. And I'm just grateful to the Lord for the privilege. And of course, Brother Wells has been a dear friend now and greatly used of the Lord in the ministry through a lot of years. Grateful for that. Well, look, I'm very appreciative. I told Brother Young I appreciated so much what he did at 8:30 this morning. If you missed that, you need to get it. Because it just resonated deeply with me, and I appreciate it so very, very much. And thank the Lord that you're here for these sessions, and look forward to being back again tonight. Now, I want to get rolling here because I know you plan to eat lunch about 3 o'clock, and I don't want you to miss your lunch, all right? All right. Hebrews chapters 3 and 4. Right at the end of chapter 3 and then into chapter 4 is where I want to read. And I will focus on a little bit of this at the right spot here, but let me just say that I know sometimes, because I have it etched in my mind, I will reference this without explanation. So if I say Dr. Luke said, you'll understand that I personally believe Dr. Luke is the writer of Hebrews. Now, I know your Schofield Bible, maybe, and some others will have it as an epistle of Paul, and it may be. It may be. But it is my opinion that it was Dr. Luke. And you say, why would you think that? Well, the epistles of Paul, the ones that we know that have his signature on it, they're written in what's commonly called the Koine Greek, which is kind of the common everyday language of the Greeks. And when Dr. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, it's more of a classical style of Greek. And Hebrews is written in that same classical style. And so whoever said Paul may be right, but it's just my opinion, and it is an opinion. But I prefer to think that Dr. Luke is the writer. So if I say that, you'll understand. Now, Dr. Luke says in chapter 3, and I begin reading with verse 12, "Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God." Now remember to whom he's writing here, Jewish Christians. These are folks who have been saved, and yet he is waving a flag of warning at them. And he's going to differentiate here in just a little bit between some who did well and some who didn't. So let's read again. "Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. While it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. For some, when they heard, did provoke. Howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. But with whom was he grieved 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? And to whom sware he that they should not enter into his rest, but to them that believe not? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Chapter 4. Let us therefore fear lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Let me read again verses 1 and 2. Let us therefore fear lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Now, if you'll please be patient, let's read it one more time, and this time with some emphasis. Let us therefore fear, lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. So 3 times in these 2 verses, we have the pronoun us. 3 times in these 2 verses, we have the pronoun them. And us is not them, and them is not us. 2 different things, 2 different people. These folks, some are doing well, and he refers to them as us. Some have not carried forth as they needed to, and he refers to them as them. A definite distinction between the 2. Now, some of the folks who had heard, some of the folks who had received the gospel, they had listened, but apparently they did not hear all that they needed to hear. It's a matter of us hearing and them not hearing what they needed to hear. Both us and them received the gospel. Both us and them received the Word of God. There was preaching to us and to them, but them did not profit from it for one simple reason. Them heard the truth. Them were preached to. But there was not a response in faith that they needed. The distinctive difference between us and them was not the fact that they were not in the room, not in the fact that they did not hear what they needed to hear, but they did, when they listened and heard what they heard, they did not mix it with faith. They did not minister in faith. They did not make faith a part of the equation. And consequently, they did not do well. So he makes this line of demarcation in saying that some are us and some are them. Now, you say, making a message out of pronouns. Hey, we ought to be used to it by now. Pronouns have gotten to be a big deal. Can you imagine that the President of the United States of America is occupying himself with trying to pay attention to people's pronouns? Pronouns, of all things, pronouns. Now, hey, prepositions, I can understand. Adverbs, maybe. But pronouns, come on, come on, man. Give me a break. Now, the emphasis on the pronouns here is significant. In fact, it tells us that the findings and the fortunes of faith are substantial. When we talk about mixing things with faith, we talk about getting faith in place. This is not some rinky-dink equation that we're talking about. This is not some fairy tale that we're dealing with here. The facts, the findings, the fortunes of faith are not only substantial, but they're very sufficient. When you start plugging in day to day, where you live, what you do, how you deal with your family, how you deal with your business, how you deal with what you're supposed to be as a Christian, all of those things. You say, when we talk about faith, we're talking about just simply hearing God, believing God, and just saying, that is the direction I will go. I will believe God. I will put my trust there. And when we mix who we are, what we do, with faith, yes, it's substantial. Yes, it's sufficient. In fact, I'm going to tell you, it's absolutely superb. It is absolutely superb. It is delightful in every sense of the word. Now, if you look carefully at chapter 4, starting with verse number 1, he does give some directions to us. When he says in that first verse, let us therefore fear. Let us therefore fear. Now, us and them, two different things. But us, we have to work among them. We are living among them. The question is, can we spot us when we are out among them? And I submit to you, we ought to be able to spot us. Our attitude ought to be such that us are different from them. Just by our attitude. They get your order wrong at McDonald's or Burger King or wherever you go. I tell you, I see how them react to that. I see how them come back and throw stuff on the counter and act ugly. But what about us? Our attitude ought to be different because we are us. Our activities ought to be different. I'm not buying lottery tickets. Why? Because I'm us. I'm not them. You know, I'm not sipping a beer because I'm us, not them. Our activity ought to be different because we are us. Our aspirations, what we aspire to, ought to be different because we're us. I met a group of young people here just a little bit ago that came through the preacher's office and looking at the college. And thankfully, young people, I mean, at 16, 17, 15 years of age, they're thinking about who they are. And some of them, they may not have thought about it like this, but in reality, what they're doing, they're saying, I'm us. I'm looking at a Christian college. That's us. I'm not thinking about going to the University of Humanism, you know. I'm us. Our aspirations ought to reflect us. Our attire ought to reflect us. You know, I travel a lot. I travel a lot, too much. Monday morning, I was up before daylight and flew to Detroit. Yesterday, I drove back from Cadillac, Michigan to Detroit and caught a flight in Detroit, had a layover in St. Louis getting here. Almost all day long yesterday making that transition. And last weekend I was in the Tampa airport 5 times in 5 weeks. Been in the Tampa airport, and every airport you go to, I can do like this and show off my cufflinks and be the only one in the whole airport with maybe how many hundreds or thousands of people in a given airport. You say, well, nobody has to wear cufflinks to be right with God. Yeah, I know that, but every once in a while you just think people would kind of spiff you up a little bit, comb their hair, brush their teeth. Yeah. A lot of the women walking through the airport, I mean, it looks like they're in their pajamas or worse. Now, the fact is, folks, you don't have to be decked out to be right with God. We all have our casual attire that we wear for certain things. But even there, it ought to communicate. Sometimes just walking through a crowd, you can be a testimony, you can be a witness. Maybe an unspoken witness. You may not get to talk to everybody that you pass in a busy lobby. But even by our attire, at least We ought not to be so like them that folks don't even suspect that we might be us. Our attire ought to reflect it. Our associations, who we run with, where we go. A lot of our guys, a lot of our independent Baptist guys have gotten headed wrong in their ministry because they went to a conference that was off center, and they knew it was off center when we're just going to go glean what we can. Yeah. See how that works? You know, put a sparrow in the cage with the canary, and see how that works out for the canary. You'll not teach the sparrow to sing, but if you're not careful, that canary will be chirping like a sparrow. And it happens with preachers all of the time, and it ought not to be. Our associations. You say, I'm strong enough, I can handle it. I don't buy that for a minute. Our associations ought to reflect us at every turn in the road. Our appropriations, I've got an A list. Our appropriations, how you spend your money, ought to reflect us. And on the list could go. And what he says here is, let us therefore fear. Now, I read in another place in the Bible where God said He's not given us the spirit of fear. You say, well, which is it? Well, it's both. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, Proverbs chapter 1. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, Proverbs chapter 8. The fear of the Lord is strong confidence, Proverbs 14. So you and I are not to fear man. We're not to fear the reproach of men. And we're not even to fear persecutions. And we may have all of that. But at the same time, our fear of God should be an awe of God. It ought to be a respect of God. It ought to be such that we handle God's name with tenderness. It ought to be such that when God waves the flag of warning, that we listen, we pay attention, we don't cross over the boundaries where God builds a fence, because we have such respect for Him. And then whenever you and I get into the whole arena of walking with God and serving Him, let's be us and not them. If you'll drop down further in that 4th chapter to verse 11, there's another one where he says, let us labor. Let us labor. Now, again, I'm reminded in the Bible, Proverbs 23 says, labor not to be rich. You say, don't think I ought to try to be wealthy. I don't know that God's put any restraints on the amount. I mean, you can make little money, lots of money. If you made lots of money, I think what He's telling us here is, don't let just piling up the money be the thing that absorbs you. I mean, I've known some wealthy people. I know some wealthy people who are absolutely, they are dyed in the wool, 100% sold out, God-fearing, serving, soul-winning Christians. And yet, they've amassed a fortune, but they've kept that fortune in its place. And they've not let it absorb them to the place where they don't serve God. And the Bible tells us that we're to labor in things that will be profitable for us, Proverbs 14. And so, yes, are we to labor? Oh, yes, we ought to labor for God's approval. All along the way. I've told my wife numerous times over the years. She and I were high school sweethearts. We married shortly after high school, and we've been married a lot of years, 61 of them now. And by the way, we're still happy about it. And but I have told her any number of times over the years, I will drive any day, any given day, I'll drive 100 miles out of my way to keep you from being jealous. To do anything that would cause her to be uncertain or to be unsure. I'll drive 100 miles out of my way any given day. You say, why is that? Because I want her approval. I want her love. I want her devotion. I want all of that, but I have to earn that. And in like fashion, what are we willing to do for God's approval? What will we do? I've become convinced of something. I go Saturday mornings soul winning, the Saturdays that my travel schedule will allow me to do that, which is about half the time. I can manage to do that. And I've become convinced of something, and just recently it just kind of shook out for me, and I said, I know why people don't come to church. Now, there's a 5% factor, 8% factor, 10% factor of people who are really sick, people are infirmed in such a way they can't get out of the house. I mean, I know there are people who have issues that are legitimate. But in the huge, overwhelming majority of the cases, the reason people don't come to church, they don't want to. You don't have to know Greek to figure that out. They don't want to. Now, conversely, the other side of that is, why do people come to church? Well, same deal. There's some folks who come because somebody, invited them or put a little pressure on them or whatever. But again, 88%, 92% or something, the people that are there, they're there because they want to. They want to be there. I go somewhere, I preach Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, fly back home on the earliest flight I can get on Wednesday morning. You know what I do Wednesday nights? I go to church. I go and sit in the pew. Now, right now, our church is without a pastor, and I'm preaching all the Wednesday nights. But typically, I go and sit in the pew. You say, why do you do that? I mean, you've already been to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday, and Tuesday. Why do you do that? Because I want to. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I want to be there. I want to put my feet under the table just like I did at 8:30 when Brother Young was up here. I wanted to be in here, and I soaked it up. Now, folks, somewhere along the way, we have to decide, do we want to honor the Lord? Do we want to be in the Lord's army? Do we want to be laboring for Him? And what He tells us here is, us are laborers. We want God's approval. We want to win people. We want to help our converts. We want to be supportive of folks in the church family as best we can. So He says, let us fear, let us labor. And if you drop down to verse 14, we got another one. He says right at the end of the verse, let us hold fast our profession. This is not a verse about hold on to it or lose it. That's not what this says at all. But it's about making a credible witness. It's about making a stand, a right stand as a Christian. You have professed something. Why do you profess it? It's because you possess it. And if you possess it and profess it, then you ought to present it in a strong, credible fashion. Show up, hold it fast. Somebody criticizes you, don't wimp out. So somebody puts heavy pressure on you, still get up. Things go sour in your life. You got a month left over and the money's run out. What do? You still show up on Sunday morning. Something crazy goes down in your life, you still show up on Wednesday night. You're holding fast to your profession. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to love you. Not everybody's going to say well of you. So what do? You hold tenaciously to what you possess and what you profess. Talking about just giving a full effort so that you'll look like a child of the King. You'll act like a child of the King. The Bible tells us we're His ambassadors. I was flying from Baltimore to Nashville. I don't know, it's been a while ago now. And got on the airplane. I fly with Southwest a lot. And being on their A list because of the many flights, usually among the first people on the flight, I walked on, and here's a guy sitting on there, and I sat 3/4 of the way back on every flight. You say, why you do that? It's because it's where I want to sit. I sit there because that's where I want to sit, all right? I walk back, and the guy right across the aisle from me, he's dressed. He's got cufflinks on. He's got a tie on. He's got a nice blue suit on. Looks like somebody. I knew I should recognize him. I knew I was supposed to know him, but it just didn't click with me. I couldn't figure out who the guy was. And I sat down, took my jacket off, put it up. I turned around and I looked at him and I said, "Sir," I said, "I don't mean to bother you, but I said, I know I'm supposed to know you. I just can't figure out right now who you are." And then he told me. He was one of our former U.S. senators from Tennessee. And at the moment, at that time, he was working for a president whose name I'll not mention. But he was ambassador to China. And very frankly, I mean, he looked like an ambassador. He looked like a representative that I would be happy to say, hey, he represents our country in a foreign land. And whenever you and I get this thing figured out and we begin to walk like us, we begin to look like us, we begin to behave like us, oh yes, it will be honoring to the King we represent. That's right. Now, drop down to the last of the chapter. Verse number 16 has another one. He says, "Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace." That's my very favorite prayer verse in all the Bible. He tells me, little short 2x4 guy, grew up in those river bottoms in western Kentucky, he lets me come boldly to heaven's throne to ask for every little detail of the things that I might need. Absolutely amazing. Now, come boldly, he says. I don't have to come sheepishly. I mean, you can be properly humble and properly bold at the same time, I believe. And he tells us here, come boldly, come on, marching in. You've got throne rights with the King of Kings. So come on, come boldly. You say, what do we do when we come in there boldly? Well, we can pray for one another. Brother Harding told me this morning, he said, I pray for you every day. Touches my heart. And a good man, somebody loves me enough to pray for me every day. We can pray for one another. I have a little notebook that I've been using for a little deal that you can open and put pages in, take pages out, that I've got a long prayer list that I've been using for many years. And then I've got one of those pull-outs on my desk. I've got that one devoted just to little sticky notes for immediate things, short-term things. People that have called or asked or bumped into and said, pray for me, I got to have surgery, I got to have this, my uncle died or whatever. I've got a whole bunch of those on there. Well, I keep that pulled out most of the time, several times a day. I'll just stop and look at it. Pray for those immediate needs. We can do that. By the way, whatever the Lord does in answer, it just does the prayer good. It does us good. It keeps us close with Him. We pray for one another. We pray for needs. Look back over those years when I was pastor and remember so many times when there was needs for this, for that, or for something else. Some of a few $100s, some a few thousand, some cases a few $1 million. And the Lord just provided step by step. Later this month, I'll finish my 28th year at the Sword of the Lord. We have seen the Lord work miraculously just one time after another. And some of it, again, multi-million-dollar answers to prayer. And I'm just simply saying, dear Lord, we need you. We need to come to you. We pray for our needs. And whether it's a little something or a big something, you can't overdraw your account in heaven. You can't put a strain on heaven's bank. You can't embarrass the Lord by what you ask for. We can pray for one another, pray for needs, pray for forgiveness, pray for leaders. As much as I have disdain for so much of what's going on in our nation's capital, it's right that we pray even for those that are bent so wrong. We pray for them, pray for our missionaries, pray for things large and small, pray about all kinds of things. Say, yeah, that's us. That's us. Oh, tell what a lot of them do. They say, yeah, you got an answer. That's just coincidence. Well, you can call it coincidence if you want to, if you want to be them. But for us, no, we're going to say, no, the Lord gave us that. You know, just every little bit. You know, you go through the TSA at the airports. If you're 75 years old, you don't have to take your shoes off. Now, I don't know what that's got to do with anything. One of those bureaucratic rules. I mean, I guess they've had no problems with anybody over 75. I don't know, but that is the rule. And I'm telling you, I think at least twice a month, when I walk in and I put my stuff down and I say to the person there, I say, I'm 75. I don't bother to tell them I'm more than that, but I just tell them I'm 75. And about twice a month, one of them will look at me and say, they say, no way. Then one of them will say to me, they'll say, I don't know what you're doing, but what are you doing? And you know what my response always to them is? I just tell them, I say, well, listen, the Lord's been mighty good to me. Mighty good to me. Now, you and I can get things and ask for it. We can testify to the Lord about it. There's one more of these. Look at chapter 6 and verse 1. In that verse, he says, let us go on unto perfection. That word perfection there, it's not talking about sinless perfection. Although if you are in this and you are us like you ought to be us, you will not be sinless, but you will sin less. And of course, this word perfection here has to do with maturity and being full bloom as a Christian. When we get saved, we're babes in Christ. There ought to be a time whenever we get to, at least to be a toddler. We ought to have some time in puberty, and we ought to become a young adult and ultimately mature so that we are a full-scale adult version of what it is to be a Christian. Maturity is not based on emotions. Maturity is more than just refraining from juvenile behavior. Maturity it's more than just restraining our appetites. Maturity takes responsibility seriously. Maturity takes note that we have influence. Maturity doesn't try to reinvent everything. Maturity keeps an eye on the Lord and keeps our heart in line with the Bible. That's us. That's us. Not them, but us. Now, the text says that faith mixed with the Word, our faith and His Word profits us. Our faith and His Word motivates us. Our faith, His Word, makes a difference in us. Now, faith will take us where unbelief can never go. All kinds of things will never come to pass because we do not faith our way. And I know we've all had to deal with cranks and naysayers and worldlings and contemporary noisemakers and worldly clattering whatever. But that clattering is always empty. It's always on the run. It's always out of sorts. It's always headed toward bitterness. It's always breaking down. And what gets us motivated, keeps us going, keeps us, not just when we're bubbling with youthful energy, but keeps us going when we become senior adults and just keeps us going. Faith abides. Faith takes us to faithfulness. Faith abounds with fervency. Faith will keep us driving and going and standing and sticking and doing as we ought to do. Faith will do that for us. When I look through the Bible, I find us pretty often. And I also see them. But it's us that I'm looking for. It's us that I want. Now, every one of us, I'm telling you today, you'll have to make some choices. You'll have to make some choices today that is either us or it's like them. Same thing will happen tomorrow. You say, when do we get to the place where we're on top of the mountain and never again have to fret over all this stuff whenever the trumpet sounds or whenever you're laying out looking natural? But in the meantime, you and I must stay vigilant about being us and not them. We can have every opportunity like them, yet walk away empty like them. There is something that I refer to as religious atheism. Let me be a little more pointed. There is something I call Baptist atheism, where we say we're us, but we behave like them. We say we're us, but we don't trust God any more than them do. Now, let me say just one thing. I'm sympathetic with them in a way. The Lord loves them just like He loves us. And them could be us the same way we became us.
That's right.
And in fact, most of us were them before we became us.
That's right.
But the deal is here that if you and I want to be the us that we ought to be, we need to determine that we will pay the price. We'll take the guff. We'll take the criticism. We'll try to do our dead level best every single day to believe God, trust Him, walk with Him, serve Him, and be the us that will distinguish us from them who do not see what they ought to see and who do not follow the Lord. So he says it very clearly. Unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. I'm telling you, so many good things about being us. For us to even lean toward being them would be foolish indeed. Just determined, I like being us. I want to stay like us. I want to run with us. I want to be a part of us. May the Lord help us to get our pronouns fixed right and stick to them. Amen. God bless you. Stand up with me, please. Let's be us and not them. Let's go after them. Let's do all we can to encourage them to come out of them and be like us. But with the Lord's help, even the weakest among us, we can be the us that we ought to be. Doesn't matter where you were born, doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter what kind of resources you have, you can be us. You're a preacher, you can be us. You're a bus captain, you can be us. You're a bus driver, you can be us. You're an usher in the church, you can be us. You're a choir member, you can be us. Or if you're somebody who's just recently gotten saved and you're not sure where you fit into the service things of the church at all, you can still be us. Believe God, trust Him, and just say, every hour of the day, whether I'm up on the mountain or down in the valley, I'm going to identify myself as us, not them. Some of us tasted them already, and it did not leave a good taste in our mouth. But we sure do like sitting down to the table and tasting what we taste when we're us. Lord, help us, I pray. May the Spirit of God so work and move among us that we are thrilled, we are blessed, we're privileged to be your children, and we know that, and we testify of that. So, Lord, I pray that you'll do in this service what you would have to be done. May the Spirit of God work and move among us, I pray, in Jesus' name. The music begins, the altar's open.